88% of home buyers used a buyer's agent according to the National Association of Realtors, end of 2020. Homes for sale by owners, FSBOs, accounted for only 8% of home sales in 2020. The typical for sale by owner home sold for less than $218,000 compared to $295,000 for real estate agent assisted home sales. We're going to answer some questions you might have and touch on some points of interest you may not have considered when trying to sell your home yourself. Hello, good people. Mike here, Realtor with Keller Williams Emerald Coast. And today we have special guest Denis Milonas. Denis is the consulting broker at Keller Williams Realty Emerald Coast. What a coincidence. I want to get his insights on this subject since he wrote the book on it, Secrets to Selling Your Home Alone. How you doing today, Denis?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for being here with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. What do you think is the mindset of a person that's trying to sell their home by themselves without using the help of a realtor? And what do you think the reality is?
Great. That's a great question, Mike.
Thank you.
I feel that, first of all, there's a lot of information about selling your home on the internet. You can watch Millionaire Real Estate Agent on HGTV. You can watch Flip This House. All that, we have so much information now flooding in. What we don't see is what's going on behind the scenes. So the mindset is, wow, these guys can do it. They can do it in a half an hour, right? Mm-hmm. However, when it comes down to it, the reality is it takes a lot longer than that. You've got preparation beforehand. You have putting it on the market. It's not that difficult to sell a house in today's market, but to close the transaction, that's where things could possibly go wrong, especially when you have a 30 to 45 day gap between the time you get a contract on your property and you close.
Why do you think some FSBOs sell and others don't?
There's a myriad of reasons why a for sale by owner property would not sell. And a lot of it goes down to how does the homeowner determine the price to start with? Are they pricing it too high? Well, actually the statistics tell us that generally the for sale by owner will actually price it too low. They're not in tune with how the market's going typically because it's not what they do for a living. As realtors, we are analyzing the market on a daily. So let's say you want to price your house and you're basing it on a house that's, let's say, 2 neighborhoods away. And you say, well, wow, that's a good price. That's what that's sold for. Your house may be able to bring more money on an open market. Mm-hmm. Because if you put it into a for sale by owner market, that's such a small percentage of the properties that are on the market. In fact, 90% of the properties that are sold by real estate agents. You're putting yourself in a 10% success rate and having all types of other competition, aren't you? Mm-hmm. So that's part of it is not pricing it properly. The second part is, how do you handle an offer when it comes in? Who's negotiating? Well, typically, the buyer has a buyer's agent. That buyer's agent is going to work real hard and has to, by law, they have to use their skill, care, and diligence when they're working for their buyer. So they're negotiating against the for sale by owner. Now, you could have somebody just fall in there and pay cash. That does happen, but so rarely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about finding the exact value of their home? How would they do that? Just go to Zillow or some other sites like that?
Well, the best way is to get a real estate license.
Oh.
And then join the multiple listing service.
Right.
Or you could go to Zillow. But if you go to Zillow and you look down at the bottom, they have a disclaimer on there. And that disclaimer tells that they don't know the exact amount. They could be off by 10 or 15%.
That's substantial.
Isn't it though? On a $500,000 house, we're talking about a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So the best way to do that is you could be looking at property appraiser reports and see what property sold for in the neighborhood. And the best thing to do would be to, in my opinion, I don't know how they're going to be able to determine what the actual value is. They can put a price on it. Typically what they do, if they overprice it, then what's going to happen there is then any buyer that's looking at the property with an agent, again, keep in mind that the buyers out there are more than likely going to be with an agent. Very seldom are you going to somebody just wander in and not know what they're doing, and all they're going to, first of all, they're just going to go in there and just say, well, how much do you want for your property? And you'll say, well, I want X amount of dollars. And then the buyer says, well, how'd you come up with that price? Well, I looked at Zillow. Are you going to be able to do what most agents can do, which is a competitive market analysis? Are you going to be able to tell what houses are on the market, how many are pending, in other words, getting ready to close,
right,
how many have closed in the last 3 to 4 months, in the right geographic area, in the right neighborhood, and what were the terms?
Showing a home sounds pretty easy. Do you have any insights on that?
Great question, Mike.
Well, thank you.
I teach a course for for the National Association of Realtors, actually. It's called Safety Matters. We are training our agents to be careful out there. So when you put a sign out in front of your yard that says for sale by owner, there was no agent numbers or anything like that on there. Mm-hmm. Now, first of all, you're probably going to get a lot of phone calls. Those phone calls are going to come a lot of times from agents. Maybe you don't really know if they're agents or not, do you? So that's showing property to someone that you've never met or don't know, or just a stranger off the street. You wouldn't normally have somebody knock on your door in a normal circumstance and say, hey, can I come walk through your house? Well, of course not. Who are you? But all of a sudden you decide to sell it, and everybody is just wonderful. Buyer's agents are trained to pre-qualify their clients, so they're not wasting their time away from their families. And they're not bringing bad people in to do harm to them or to anybody else or to the property. So how can a for sale by owner screen those people? First of all, they don't have the training. Second of all, they don't have the tools and resources in order to do that. They haven't pre-qualified the buyer at all, have they? There's no way.
No. Does a seller really need to know much about negotiations, or is it pretty much a straightforward offer, counter offer, sign here?
You know what? I think about that a lot. Now, there's some people out there that are salespeople, and they probably could have negotiation skills and that like. However, there are a lot of other things that they may be able to negotiate, and unless they're trained like agents typically are, they're not going to be able to know what they can negotiate, what to expect, and what is our market doing as far as negotiations. They typically won't know that. Again, a lot of information is online, done online. Everything online is the truth, right?
Absolutely. Is there one standard, easy to navigate sales contract to use?
Yes and no. The state of Florida has, actually the Florida Realtors has prepared by the attorneys. There's a large legislative branch that helps this, and they actually vote on changes every they have a meeting in January, they have one in August where all the attorneys sit around the table and they scrutinize all the contracts, the real estate contracts that are used in the state of Florida. And then the agents are trained on how to fill those contracts out, not to write them. Mm-hmm. So there are standard contracts. There's a FAR bar contract. There's a CRISP 16, which stands for the Contract for Residential Sale and Purchase, 16th version, and there's an as-is residential sale and purchase contract. So there's 3 types of different contracts that are used by, it's a standard throughout doing real estate business in the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. Now, you could go to an attorney and have them write it up. Here's the thing about hiring an attorney, and that's fine. If you do hire an attorney, they get paid by the hour. They may charge, I don't know, $350, $400, $500 an hour, right?
Mine gets paid well.
Okay, so you get them to work on this. They're punching their little timer, and they're working on your contract for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. So they run a bill $2,000 to $3,000, right? Mm-hmm. So they look it over and make sure everything's just proper with it, and then, hey, it looks all good to me. Here you go. And then the buyer backs out. Guess what? You know what happens?
The lawyer gives the money back?
No. They still get paid. Agents only get paid when their transaction closes. And that's really where they earn their money, is understanding the contracts, going to contract classes, preparing contracts, and knowing all the nuances within the contract, or I call them landmines that could be there, mm-hmm. and to be able to prepare that. So what kind of a contract is a for sale by owner going to use? Well, generally, they're going to be presented an offer from a buyer's agent. Mm-hmm. We've already agreed with that earlier on.
Yes.
So if they get that contract from a buyer's agent knows how to fill it out to the best advantage for the buyer, mm-hmm. not the seller. why wouldn't the seller want somebody looking out for them on their side?
With the seller not being a realtor, do they have any responsibility for disclosure, or can they just list it as is and be okay?
In the state of Florida, on a residential transaction, there's called the Residential Property Disclosure Act. And what that means, this doesn't apply to commercial, but it does apply to any residential, that the seller has to declare any defects that would materially affect the value of the property and not be readily observed by a potential buyer. So they have to disclose. If they don't, they're breaking the law. What are those items? The agent knows.
Is there much other paperwork besides the sales contract, or is that pretty much it? Sign here and done.
The residential sale and purchase contracts have actually the FAR bar contract is 13 pages. The CRISP 16 has 9 pages. So there's a lot of words in there. However, they don't address every single part of a transaction. In other words, there may need to be a rider for instance, if somebody's financing with FHA or VA, the FHA and the VA, they're government-backed loans, they require an addendum for the loan to go through. So we need that addendum. We may have to have an addendum. What if the buyer has to sell a property before they buy yours? There has to be an addendum attached to the contract, because the contracts typically don't incorporate that into them automatically. There could be some other contingencies that need to be made based on that offer. So you can see, other than the 13 pages, there are actually 26 addendums that can be chosen by the real estate agent.
Wow.
And the reason we don't want the real estate agents aren't attorneys, okay? But they can present these addendums that are prepared by attorneys for the seller to go ahead and look at and either approve, disapprove, or negotiate. And so all these little moving parts, that's where the listing agent comes into play, to guide that person, that for sale by owner, maybe out of a possible problem later on.
And any paperwork with a title company?
Well, the title company is going to require a valid contract. They're going to require more than likely, does the seller have a survey? What about inspection reports, that types of things that are going to be done by the buyer? Some of the WDO, or the wood destroying organism, which is, they look for wood rot and that type of thing in our area. That's going to be required as far as the lender is going to need a clean WDO report. In other words, to fund the transaction. That's where the money's coming from, unless you got a cash buyer. So there are all different types of paperwork that is going to need to be done and be handled. And that's another part where the agent comes into play. They're keeping up with all the timelines too. Does the for sale owner know what the timelines are, what they mean? Time is of the essence in any of these contracts.
That's true.
And so are they keeping up with the timelines? If those timelines are passed or gone over, that could really jeopardize the deal. And a lot of times that's why a deal does fall apart, because the for sale owner is not following up. They're not following up with the lender. They're not following up with inspections. They're not following up with the surveyors or the appraisers or anything like that.
They don't understand the importance of the timeline and getting this paperwork submitted.
There's a lot of things that can happen because of timelines.
Well, that scratches the surface. We could have easily made this video an hour long, but we wanted to keep it bite-sized. I appreciate you sharing your experience, Dennis, and I appreciate your time very much. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thinking of selling your house yourself?
He gets all choked up on that when he just thinks about that.
Thanks again to Dennis for sharing his experience and knowledge. Here's another video you might like to check out. If you have any questions about real estate in the area, my contact information is down in the description. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It's rather painless, actually.